Oh my gosh, Kotaku freaking sucks. What's up gamers, Dreamcastguy here, and today I have to make a video purely for fun because apparently multiple journalists over at Kotaku have come out against the Final Fantasy VII Remake, saying that it's going to be too long, saying that it kills all their hype. I mean, this is so freaking ridiculous. Now, I do want to say real quickly here at the start, there are some legitimate criticisms of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, yesterday they came out with a giant demo that, personally, I love the heck out of. But I have seen some people say that they thought the hack-and-slash combat, it just wasn't for them. And I think that's totally fair. But the complaints that Kotaku has are just dumb. Now let's go through this. This is an official article on the front page of Kotaku.com right now because they got to play 3 hours of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. This was a special journalist-only event, and I mean, obviously I didn't get invited because I'm just a Final Fantasy fan, but it sounds like Jason Schreier is definitely not a Final Fantasy fan. I want to read through this because there's just so much in this that is hilariously bad and shows that, if anything, he is a downright terrible gamer. If you've ever played Final Fantasy VII, you're probably familiar with the Airbuster, a floating robot who resembles a vacuum cleaner. Airbuster, the game's second boss, takes roughly 2 minutes to kill. He's more of a tutorial on an enemy weak points than a genuine threat. Hint, use the bolt spell. So it's more than a little jarring to see the Final Fantasy VII Remake turn him into a super weapon. Even in the original Final Fantasy VII, they referred to him as a super weapon, part of the new Mecha Soldier project. It's almost as if they're expanding on already existing themes. But we'll come back to that. As we've known for years now, the Final Fantasy VII Remake will unfold in episodes, with the first game comprising the events that take place in the city of Midgar. The first episode, called confusingly just Final Fantasy VII Remake, is coming out April 10th for PlayStation 4. In the original game, the first Midgar section takes up 5 or 10% of the story, taking maybe 4 or 5 hours to complete, but the remake, developer says, will be the size of an entire Final Fantasy. If that's true, it means adding a whole lot of new stuff to Midgar, which is already evident in trailers and demos, where we've seen all sorts of new cutscenes and story expansions. Now that, to me, sounds great. I am obsessed with Final Fantasy VII, so seeing new side quests, new characters, new little side things that are just going to be there to reward our curiosity, that sounds absolutely like a giant plus. But somehow, he's about to spin that as a negative. Last week at a Square Press event, I spent around 3 hours playing the remake, and it's certainly safe to say that it's full of new stuff. In addition to the overhauled combat system, there's expanded materia, added cutscenes, a giant weapon skill tree, and enough tweaks to make the Final Fantasy VII Remake feel like something brand new. Oh my gosh, that gets me so good. The game feels excellent, but there's also something disconcerting about it. For those who played the Final Fantasy VII so many times the original is burned inside their heads, it's hard to shake the feeling that this remake is a fraction of what it should be. Let me make this camera full screen for a second. This guy is paid hundreds of thousands of dollars every single year to play video games. He talks about games. He's flying all over the world to play the latest and greatest games, and he's acting like it is bad that the game will be dramatically longer. I am losing my mind. Alright, let's go back to this. Put it another way, one of the best things about playing Final Fantasy VII for the first time is the moment when you get out of Midgar and realize there's an entire open world to explore, an entire map full of towns and stories and secrets. Final Fantasy VII Remake delivers the exact opposite feeling. I can't help but feel disappointed that Midgar is all we're going to get. This is an entire giant living city. They're going to be expanding the original ideas of the Final Fantasy VII that we know and love and turning it into a new thing. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is a new game. Midgar is a new city. This is going to be a complete reimagining. It's 100 gigabytes, Jason. Obviously, this is going to be a big living city. I am just appalled that you would act like this is somehow a negative, that they're expanding on the original ideas. Which brings us back to Airbuster. In the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I played for around 3 hours last week at Square's press events, the Airbuster is a heavy weapon designed by Shinra, the evil corporation that runs Midgar. You first see it deactivated on your way to the core of Shinra's Mako Reactor 5, which your party has come up to blow in Chapter 7's, in the Remake's Chapter 7. I'm going to skip this part right here. It's just basically recapping the basic things of Final Fantasy VII. On your way to the reactor's core, where Cloud and crew plan to set up a bomb, your party makes a few comments about how the Airbuster sure looks scary and how it would be bad if Shinra activated it. Foreshadowing! If they decide to deploy it, says Cloud, our best bet would to be run like hell. When they get to the core, they discover that Shinra has been watching their progress this whole time. A giant hologram of Heidegger, of Shinra executive, taunts them for a while and then promises to activate the Airbuster in order to publicly execute all of Avalanche for Midgar's enjoyment. We then learn that the Airbuster is only 70% operational and that Shinra's engineers will be scrambling to finish putting it together. We see Shinra sending the robot up an elevator, where no doubt it'll be waiting at the top when the crew escapes. To me, that seems like a fantastic setup. That seems like a good chance to kind of get you afraid of a boss. I kind of like when games sort of tease the inevitable. From there, your party fights their way up the building, battling guards and passing through a series of computer rooms full of parts and internals. You're then told that you can tamper with the Airbuster before actually fighting it. Each of the computer rooms contains a key card that you can insert into one of the terminals to affect Airbuster in some way. You can take out its AI programming, which will hamper its tactical awareness. You can remove its big bomber shells and disable one of its particular abilities. That one was so savage in the original Final Fantasy VII. Or 3, dispose of its M units, which won't do much to the boss itself, but will get you some cool items. You can do these 4 times in your way through the reactor. That, to me, again, sounds like a giant positive. It sounds like they're taking a very tiny thing and making it a more rewarding experience. When you finally get to the top, you'll exit the reactor and wind up on a 3-way rope bridge, much like the original game. Shinra holograms will taunt you some more. The president accuses Avalanche of working with the foreign country of Wutai, while Heidegger calls you pawns in our plans to sell great and glorious war to the people. And then they'll finally send out the Airbuster. Just like the game's first boss, Scorpion Sentinel, who I fought at E3, the Airbuster is transformed from a 2-minute button mash fest into a menacing boss that would be worthy of any action RPG, complete with powerful attacks and multiple phases. I had to pull out my party's tricks to beat him, from spells to items to summons, which can be called upon to fight alongside your heroes. Tutorial, this isn't. Oh my gosh, look at that freaking screenshot. Oh my gosh, I'm so hyped for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, all of this is so cool, but you can already kind of tell the whiny tone of Jason Schreier. This whole sequence, which is Chapter 7 of the game, is certainly cool. The combat is excellent, the dialogue is snappy, and a lot of it is fun to play. But the transformation of a tutorial boss into a Shinra superweapon is also a reminder that by the end of the game's first episode of Final Fantasy VII Remake, we'll have only seen a piece of the game's sprawling plot. Oh my gosh, how is he spinning this into a negative? The original game has more than 30 bosses. If the second one is now an elite robot beast that needs to be tampered with before you can defeat it, what's it going to look like when you get to fight Genova, or Ruby Weapon, or even Sephiroth? How many years is it going to take before we play the entire game? Oh my, I'm like losing my mind right now. Alright Jason, maybe just sit down. Let's talk. Gamer to journalist. I think you're just kind of missing the point. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is expanding on an idea. It's trying to take a very simplistic and sometimes at times archaic game and translating it into a modern adventure. It's taking ideas of loss, of pain, of suffering, of fear, and it's expanding these into an entire game. The confusion of what's going on with Avalanche, how they're going to stop Shinra, how much it's going to take to just save the planet from the evils of Sephiroth, Sephiroth. These are rewarding parts of the Final Fantasy VII story, and each of them is now essentially being expanded into their own game. Imagine if somebody told you, hey, did you enjoy eating that Hot Pocket? Well, now we're going to give you a 10-course meal. And you're like, but I missed the Hot Pocket. This is a good thing, Mr. Schreier. Alright, but let's get back to it. Throughout the Final Fantasy VII Remake, there were all sorts of story sections that weren't in the original game. Some of them served to expand on the original game's themes, as the members of AVALANCHE openly question whether they're doing the right thing, particularly after the bombing of Mako Reactor 1, the game's opening chapter. Turns out to be far more destructive than they'd originally intended. Chapter 2 of the remake unfolds in the streets and rooftops of Midgar, and you get an intimate look into how all this upended the lives of average citizens. That sounds so good. Cloud also sees hallucinations of Sephiroth, hinted at but never quite shown in the original, and flashes to the events of Nibelheim, which in the original game unfolded entirely through one long playable flashback sequence once you leave Midgar. All these story additions work quite nicely, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else there is when the game comes out for real. I'm also very curious to see how the developers can possibly wrap up the story in any way that satisfies anyone familiar with Final Fantasy VII. Oh my gosh, this sentence is about to make me lose my mind. From what I've seen, I'm pessimistic. How? You literally just described a giant laundry list of features that are improved over the original. They have tons of new magic. They have a completely new combat system. You can stop time and literally just throw a potion on your buddy to keep him alive. This is a reinvention of the freaking wheel, and you're being like, I just don't trust him to make it good. What is going on in your brain, Jason? Oh my god, from what I've seen, I'm pessimistic. It's not clear how much will be completely new. Will we get to see new sections of Midgar that weren't accessible in the original? But everything I've played over these 3 hours was more of a re-envisioning than something entirely new, which would be perfectly lovely if the remake didn't end 1/10 of the way into the game. What? Once I defeated the Airbuster in Chapter 7, just before Cloud's plummet to Aerith's church, Square Enix reps skipped me ahead to Chapter 10. Now I was in Midgar's sewer system fighting Abzu, the boss you face right after confronting the lecherous Don Corneo. Just like the first 2 bosses, Abzu has been expanded and refined. Now he leaps around the sewers, clinging to walls and pouncing on your characters. Your party has thousands of hit points at this point and is equipped with a wide range of skills, materia, and summons. Abzu is also way tougher now. I got a game over on my first try before changing tactics to rely upon one of Aerith's new abilities to heal my entire party every single possibility. Using healing spells or items requires a chunk of your ATB cage, which is active time battle, which fills up when you attack. So you actually have to be aggressive if you want to heal. An unusual but welcome strategic difference between the Final Fantasy VII Remake and just about every other RPG. Yet again, I'm left wondering, if the Midgar sewers are Chapter 10, how many chapters are there going to be? It's safe to assume that Shinra's headquarters will be the final dungeon of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Even if it's expanded in a big way, how satisfying will it be to finish, knowing that there will be so much left to see in the future episodes? Oh my gosh, Jason, what is wrong? Did somebody, like, punch you in the face with a copy of the Final Fantasy VII game? I mean, how can somebody tell you that a bigger universe with more to do is somehow a limited experience? When you're watching a TV show, are you mad that it's not done yet? Like, I'm not gonna watch a single episode of Mr. Robot until all 8 seasons are done. They're currently developing it, Jason. This is an ongoing series, Jason. Will the Final Fantasy VII fans be able to ignore that lingering, nagging feeling that the story might be years from a resolution? The story changes are fascinating, the new combat is very satisfying, and it all looks and feels great. But when you know how much more the game should be there, will that be enough? You're implying so much. You're literally act liking the first game being big big is a detriment. To detail all the differences between the Final Fantasy VII Remake and the original would require an in-depth wiki page that will no doubt pop up the day it comes out. In the meantime, with the game just a few weeks away, I'll say this. Everything I've seen so far in the Final Fantasy VII Remake is excellent. I'm just worried that to anyone who played the original, it'll feel less like a proper meal and more like a $60 appetizer. Well, I'm a mega fan. I've bought in every version of Final Fantasy VII. I bought it on PS1, I bought PC, I bought PS4, I bought it on PSP, I own it on Nintendo freaking Switch. I love the Final Fantasy VII games. I love Dirge of Cerberus. I love Advent Children. I am totally on board for whatever the heck we end up getting with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, you may be saying, this is just one writer clearly hating Final Fantasy. That's fine. But here's another guy. This is Chris Kohler. Chris Kohler is, again, a big writer over at Kotaku. And look at this. Wow, did the Final Fantasy VII Remake demo actually send my interest plummeting? I have basically zero idea how to play the first boss fight. A million interlocking systems all thrown at you at once. Make sure to attack, but also heal. But you also can't heal, but also use magic, but you can't use magic, but also make sure to stagger the enemy, but he also has a barrier, but also hide behind this debris, but also... How can your job be playing video games and you are so bad at video games? Look, I'm not a major league gamer. I'm not going to tournaments. Well, I go to tournaments, but I lose them just because it's fun to try. These people are awful. How can you be getting crushed by a demo? I'm losing my freaking mind. I'm just gonna, I don't know. I don't even know what to tell you guys. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't read Kotaku. If there's ever anything good on Kotaku, I'll report on it. But don't even give these people a freaking click. Thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I have a big video, by the way, about Neo that I edited days ago that I keep forgetting to put up. I need to put that up today. Or I'll put it up tomorrow. Oh my gosh. Kotaku, you suck! Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.